How are you related to your cousins? Let's say you see that first cousin once removed, but you don't know how you're related. Or you see your DNA cousins and you see that first cousin bucket and that second cousin bucket and you don't know exactly how they relate to you. Is there a way to calculate that? Well, yes, there is. And there is a chart to help you with that. But first, if you are new here, my name is Connie Knox. I am a lifelong genealogist here to help you go further faster and factually with your family history research. There is a handout for the channel members. We can talk more about that at the end of the show. Today, we are talking about how to determine your relationship with your cousins, how to calculate the relationships between two ancestors, and how to know what ancestors to look for when researching your DNA cousins.
You don't see that every day.
Demonstrating all of that here right now. Well, we're going to figure out how we are related to our cousins and help us grow our tree a little bit. We're going to figure out those DNA cousins, and we're going to figure out exactly what a first cousin once removed is if you're not familiar. So I get this question a lot, and so we're going to just kind of talk about the basics here for a second. What is the difference between a second cousin and a second cousin once removed? So we're going to start with this, and then we're going to jump into the DNA cousin matches and a little bit more strategy about how you can figure out how you're related to people. We're also going to be talking about, you know, when you're looking at your DNA cousins and they're falling into that second to third cousin bucket, the fourth to fifth cousin bucket, how on earth do you figure out who they are? So we're going to talk about understanding those relationships and how to figure it out. So what is the difference between a first cousin and a first cousin once removed? So if we take a look at a relationship chart, for example, here you are, and you have a first cousin who is a descendant of your aunt. So you have that your grandparents are they're in the yellow box, is the common ancestor to you and your first cousin. So you got to get used to taking a look at who is the common ancestors. There's your father and your aunt, and then your first cousin, and then your first cousin has a child, and that is your first cousin once removed. So the removed part is just a generation difference. Okay, so let's take this a little bit farther, because if you have half relationships, where does that come from, right? So if we take a look at that yellow box there at the top, where your grandfather is the one that's in common, but you have different grandmothers. With your father has one mother and your aunt has a different mother. So that means that your aunt is a half aunt to you. Okay. And then, so you're right here, you're the grandchild of the common ancestor. Okay. And then there's your dad and there's your half aunt and then your half first cousin. So if from our common ancestor, if we have different grandparents, then everyone in that line is going to be a half relation to you. So you got your half aunt, your half first cousin, and if your first cousin has a child, that would be your half first cousin once removed. Okay, so there's this chart. You can find these charts all over the internet, but I have it in for the channel members as part of the handout. And so there's a way here that you can figure out the relationship not only to you, but to others. And so we're going to talk about that here in a minute. So we're going to look for that common ancestor. And how is that common ancestor related to you? And let's pretend for a moment that you are the grandchild of the common ancestor. So this chart then works in that if you have another cousin who is a great-grandchild of that same common ancestor, then basically you follow the grid to where they meet and you can discover that that is a first cousin once removed. That's just another way to look at what we did a moment ago. So we could take this one step further. Let's pretend you're trying to figure out the relationship between two different people and it's not you. So you start with the common ancestor again, and let's pretend for a moment that this person that you're trying to figure out how they're related, these two people, one of them is a great-great-grandchild of the common ancestor. Let's pretend for a moment that the other person is a great-great-grandchild. Well, where do they intersect? They intersect at third cousin once removed. So this little chart's kind of handy to have, helps you figure that out pretty quickly. All right, let's take a look at DNA cousins for a moment. Now, I've clipped 3 different people out of my DNA cousins. One is a first to second cousin bucket. One is a second to third cousin bucket, and the other one is a third to fourth cousin bucket. You're getting the idea. So we have the long list of DNA cousins, and they fall into these different buckets. How do we figure out how they could be related to us, especially if they don't have a tree or a very small tree? Okay, so let's take a look at the tree for a moment. Here's that first cousin, Daryl, and we're trying to figure out how is it that he is related. Who do we have in common? Well, it's going to be one of two sets of grandparents because a first cousin shares grandparents. Okay. If we move on to second cousins are going to descend from one of these four sets of great-grandparents. And if we take that one step further, third cousins are going to share a set of great-great-grandparents. Okay. So are the wheels turning yet? Are you starting to kind of get an idea how this is going? How can we apply this to our research? So if we take a look at the tree, and we're trying to solve for this person. Let's pretend we know everybody else, up to this point, and we've got some of our great-grandparents in there, but we want to know who is this great-grandparent. Well, in order for us to figure that out, we need to go take a look at our second cousin matches in our DNA research. Or, alternatively, maybe we just know some other second cousins out there. If we're looking for somebody over here in the great-great-grandparent section of our tree, then we're looking for a third cousin. So we can eliminate some of those cousins. So let's take a look at this for a second. If we are searching for that one person who is a third cousin, then all we really need to do is research these stepping stones to get to that great-grandparent. And we only need to research the DNA cousins in those red boxes. We can eliminate everyone else. Well, almost. Let's think about this for a moment. We might not want to eliminate these two boxes because they're the spouses of those people who may have records that also assist us in our search. So we don't want to eliminate those, but we could search for DNA cousins or just the family trees for those green boxes as well because it may help us solve our problem. So we'll leave those open for now. So things that we can do to help us in our search. We could do surname filtering over there on, let's say, Ancestry DNA. We could go and search by surname. Actually, you can do this on any of the services. Search by surname. We could group by known cousins. And what I mean by that is if we know a cousin who belongs on this side of the tree where the red boxes are and even the green boxes, but we know a known cousin, then we can do a shared matches filtering with cousins that belong in that line of the tree. We can also look for common ancestors in our DNA results who come from this red line. It might just be that one of those DNA cousins has more people and more lines going back in time to help you with your research. And when we do that, we're going to discover who that is, and we're going to be able to break down that brick wall. We briefly talked about grouping DNA cousin matches. There's a whole episode I did on how to group. In fact, there's several episodes on how to group your DNA cousins, especially on Ancestry. I demonstrated a lot. I will leave a link in the show notes for this episode. Let me show you one more thing, the G rule. So what is the G rule? The G rule is we're counting the G's in great-grandparent. So if you are trying to solve for a second cousin, we want to take a look at that common ancestor. Let's pretend you're looking and you're trying to figure out who that second cousin is. This through lines view helps us understand how that may come about. So if Charles down here, the second cousin, was a mystery in our DNA list, we didn't know how he related, this might be an opportunity to jump over to through lines and see how he's related. And of course, if we take the number of G's in great and grandparent, so great grandparent is 2G, so that means that it's a second cousin. It's a quick and dirty way. It's a trick to help figure out how you can be related to a second cousin. You are looking for a great grandparent in common. Same goes for a third cousin. You would be looking for a great great grandparent in common. So count the G's. That's what the G rule is. Okay, so one other thing you need to know is that if your second cousin has a child, that is your second cousin once removed, but is also probably going to fall under the second cousin bucket in your match list. You're still looking for a great-grandfather or great-grandparents. Hey, just a reminder, there is a handout for the channel members. If you want to learn more about that, click the join button. If you're not a channel member, you can learn more about it there. You need to be at the information access level to get the handouts. You can get all the handouts by joining. And once you are a member, what you need to do to get the handouts is go to the community tab on the YouTube channel and scroll through the blog posts and look for the ones that say handout. And then you can download all of the handouts for all the episodes that are available. All right, there are more videos on the screen for you now. I hope you enjoy them.